All right, testing, testing. How's everybody doing this afternoon? Can you hear me all right? Just let me know in the chat. We're going to get started here in just a minute. Let some people trickle in. Oh, good. I'm glad you were able to catch that one, Poppy. Woohoo! Good. Solid audio is key. So, I'm going to get started because there's a lot of ground to cover today in this presentation. I am well. Excited to be doing this. So, last week... Okay, now I can begin. So last week I did a reading of the end of Book 5 and the whole of Book 6 in Nonnus's Dionysiaca. And I had so much fun with it that I wanted to jump on here today, and we might make this a whole journey. Maybe we'll do the whole thing. Maybe we'll do the entire book, but or all 48 books. But today we're going to be focusing on Book 1. This one I've kind of titled, he doesn't title his books necessarily. In the version that we brought up in the last live stream, there are some titles, but this one I'm titling The Bull's Descent. Nice haircut. Thanks. Thanks, Healing with Diamonds. Yeah, I guess I'm usually wearing a hat or a beanie. I didn't get there today. There was so much ground to cover for this presentation. But this Book 1 is really intriguing. There's a lot going on. I just released a Substack article on it as well to kind of go along with this. But we're going to go much more in depth today here. This is going to be about the divine longing and the ecstasy of form. Now, what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be weaving together not only Nonnus's epic, but also the Dionysian, Orphic, Neoplatonic elements that are contextualizing his time and what really teach us about his time. We're not just going to be reading him, we're going to be looking through many of the different voices of that time period. So let's get started because there are a lot of slides for me to get through today. So, historical context, I touched on it a little bit last time. Nonnus of Panopolis, he's in Egypt, 5th century CE. His 48 books are the longest surviving Greek epic with 20,426 lines, and he composes them during the twilight of classical paganism. Nonnus is also authored or attested to have authored the paraphrase of the Gospel of John, which is kind of a Dionysian take on the Gospel of John, which is really interesting. Maybe one day I'll do a little bit on that. But what we're seeing in this is there is, as is characteristic of the time, this late antique syncretism, where there is a blending of different concepts from different, what we would think today are seemingly diametrically opposed or, just kind of polemically opposed against each other. But in his time, it wasn't quite there. You have to understand, in Egypt, in Alexandria, in all of these melting pot areas, these people are talking to each other. There are the heads of the major schools talking to each other. The people who are really developing the modern world are at this time. So in Nonnus's work, we see a melding of that, and it is really masterful how he accomplishes that. So in Book 1, there is a basic structure that we're going to tackle today. There is the classic epic poem proem, which is like a prologue or an invocation. It kind of sets up the whole working. Imagine if this was being performed, it would be performed with this invocation, this calling in of the muses or of a specific force in order to speak through the writer or the reciter. So in this case, we'll be doing that as well, because I'm going to recite the whole book. We're going to stop along the way and talk about it. After this invocation, we see the transformation of Zeus into a bull, followed by the abduction of Europa. Afterwards, we find Typhoeus, the giant, stealing the thunderbolts of Zeus. There's this disruption of the cosmic order. And then there is the mortal Cadmus, who, through the deception and the harmonious sounds of his music, helps Zeus to recover his divinity in this really epic tome that we're about to go through. So, what's our approach? How are we going to take this? Well, there's this concept of the palimpsest, and it's based on the idea that something can be its own thing, right? Its own narrative, but has the underlying layers or the reflections or mirrors of something else. Now, a palimpsest typically was like a piece of parchment that was the ink is scratched off, right? And then somebody wrote over it a new story, but you can kind of look back into the parchment itself and see the old story behind the new story that somebody has now re-inked on. Now, this is a concept that has been expanded from theology and onward into literary works and the like. Now, what we're dealing with today is, of course, theology, cosmology, and a literary work from late antiquity. Now, the palimpsest we're using, the story that we are really drawing from, or I think Nonnus is drawing from, is that Orphic narrative, the Dionysian narrative. And that comes from, in our case, the Orphic Rhapsodies and all of the Orphic fragments that come down to us from that late antique period. See, this is stuff that Nonnus has in his, wheelhouse, readily available in Panopolis in Egypt. So it's clear that he is speaking from some of those sources. And so what we can see within his writing when we use this technique is that he is talking about an Orphic or a Dionysian conception of reality, and he is trying to bring those things forward in his masterwork. So that is what we'll be using. Now, there are some key dialectical movements that we'll be talking about: unity to multiplicity and then back again in reintegration. There's also some themes of divine descent and voluntary self-limitation by divinity, which leads us to cosmic disruption and harmonic restoration. Beyond that, we have dismemberment and reconstitution, which is kind of foreshadowing for what we eventually saw in Book 5 and 6, where Zagreus is dismembered and then reconstituted later as Dionysus. Now, this also, to me, upon reading it, it was pretty clear that what Nonnus is attempting to do is he's contemplating the journey of the soul. And we're going to talk about that at length as we go through these pieces. But let's get to it. Let's just get to it. Telltale, the goddess of Cronades, courier with fiery flame, the gasping travail which the thunderbolt brought with sparks for wedding torches, the lightning in waiting upon Semile's nuptials, tell the nascence of Bacchus twice born, whom Zeus lifted still moist from the fire, a baby half complete, born without midwife. Now that's an opening. How with shrinking hands he cut the incision in his thigh and carried him in his man's womb, father and gracious mother at once, and well he remembered another birth, when his own head conceived, when his temple was big with child, and he carried that incredible unbegotten lump until he shot out Athena scintillating in her armor. Bring me the fennel, rattle the cymbals, ye muses, put in my hand the wand of Dionysus, whom I sing, but bring me a partner for your dance in the neighboring island of Paros. Proteus of many turns, that he may appear in all his diversity of shapes, since I twang my harp to the diversity of songs. For if, as a serpent, he should glide along with his winding trail, I will sing my god's achievement, how the ivy-wreathed wand he destroyed the horrid hosts of giants serpent-haired. If as a lion he shake his bristling mane, I will cry, Eoi! Eoi! to Bacchus, on the arm of buxom Rhea, stealthily draining the breast of the lion-breeding goddess. If as a leopard he shoot up into the air with a stormy leap from his pads, changing shape like a master craftsman, I will hymn the son of Zeus, how he slew the Indian nation, with his team of pards, riding down elephants. If he make his figure like the shape of a boar, I will sing Thyone's son, lovesick for Ora the desirable, boar slayer, daughter of Cybele, mother of the third Bacchus, late born. If he be the mimic water, I will sing Dionysus, diving into the bosom of the brine when Lycurgus armed himself. If he becoming a quivering tree and a tune a counterfeit whispering, I will tell of Icarios, how in the jubilant winepress his feet crushed the grape in rivalry. So that there is the opening. That is the proem, the poetic invocation. He's calling in essentially the spiritual forces to help him be mused to tell the stories. And he, in many places, tells us who he's talking about. He's talking about Dionysus and the many, many forms that Dionysus can take. Now, if you watched the previous Dionysiaca video that I did, in the case of Zagreus being attacked by the Titans, he changes form multiple times into different beings. Well, what this is, what I think Nonnus is talking about is this idea of unity becoming multiplicity. It's the ability of one thing to become the many. And he calls upon Proteus, this divine shapeshifter, and this serves as a metapoetic emblem for this principle of primordial multiplicity and unity that really just flows through the entirety of the Dionysiaca. As the god who can transform into myriad forms, Proteus represents the Orphic conception of poikilia, or diversity, as a fundamental ontological principle akin to the Orphic Fanes, who we know about from some of my other work on the channel. There is a video on Fanes, which you can go take a look at. But he's essentially the firstborn deity of the Orphic cosmos, who manifests in a multitude of hybrid animal forms. In fact, most of it is the tetramorph, the bull, the lion, the eagle, all of these different forms. Now, Phanes was revealed to have 4 eyes looking this way and that, so in all directions, with golden wings on his shoulders, and the heads of bulls growing out of his sides, and the head of a serpent presenting the appearance of all kinds of animal forms. Well, if we think really hard and we see the image here, this is very much the demiurge. Now, whether that's a Gnostic demiurge or even the tetramorph of Yahweh in the Bible, what we have here is this primordial firstborn deity that has these animal forms that is clearly being hearkened to here by Nonnus. Let's continue. Bring me the fennel, mimolons, on my shoulders in place of the wonted kirtle. Bind, I pray, tight over my breast, a dapple-back fawnskin. Now, the mimolons, that is a callback to Bacchantes, the followers of Bacchus. Full of the perfume of Maronian nectar, and let Homer and deep-sea Eidothea keep the rank skin of the seals for Menelaus. Give me the jocund timbres and the goatskins, but leave for another the double-sounding pipe with its melodious sweetness, or I may offend my own Apollo, for he rejects the sound of breathing reeds, ever since he put to shame Marsyas and his god-defiant pipes, and bared every limb of the skin-stripped shepherd, and hung his skin on a tree to belly in the breezes. Then come now, goddess, begin with the long search and the travels of Cadmos. Once on the Sidonian beach, Zeus, as a high-horned bull, imitated an amorous bellow with his changeling throat, and felt a charming thrill. Little Eros heaved up a woman, with his 2 arms encircling her middle, and while he lifted her at his side, the seafaring bull curved his neck downwards, spread under the girt to mount, sinking sideways on his knees, and stretching his back submissive. He raised up Europa, then the bull pressed on, and his floating hoof furrowed the water of the trodden brine noiselessly with forbearing footsteps. Now, Moron is a fine wine from Maronia in Thrace. So this Maronian nectar, this vino, this wine, we can see it's coming from Thrace. And who comes from Thrace? It's Dionysus. This is where all of this Dionysian stuff tends to be coming from. Now, the shame of Marsyas, what he's talking about here is it's a story of Athena invented the reed pipes, but she threw the instrument away, and Marsyas picks it up and was so pleased with it that he challenged Apollo to a musical contest. Well, Apollo won and then ends up flaying this guy Marsyas alive. So here we've got the other side of the coin, Apollo, harmonious music of Apollo. This is like the cosmic order. Well, Dionysus represents that ecstatic kind of forest, woodland, very animal, ecstatic music. So we have the two sides of this Dionysian coin, where it's Dionysus and Apollo. That's where Nonnus is going with a lot of this here. So this divine metamorphosis that we see Zeus go through is his transformation into a bull is a voluntary descent into materiality. He's basically foreshadowing what Dionysus' journey is going to be in this first book. This katabatic movement, remember we've talked about this in the channel before, katabasis. This is a going downward or a going inward into more condensed reality. Generally speaking, katabasis is to the underworld. In some cases, the underworld and this world that we live in are considered the same thing. This realm of Pluton, if you will. But this idea of Zeus willingly surrendering his divinity and power is very strange. It's not something that we think of. You don't think of a god going, I'm going to willingly become mortal. But it embodies a key principle in this Orphic cosmology. There is a divine procession from unity into multiplicity. It seems to be, in late antiquity, this idea that this unity delights in or finds pleasure in the explosion into multiple forms, into all of these various beings that we see now. Now, Damascius comments on this in his Principles, on the Principles. The divine does not remain in its original simplicity, but proceeds into multiplicity. And Proclus, also, with his Pruodos, every procession is accomplished through a likeness of secondary things to their primaries. So there's a connection to it. This unity explodes into multiplicity, and that's what we're seeing in this Zeus willingly becoming material. This voluntary divine self-limitation or diminishment, it's a kenosis. It's really, like I said before, foreshadowing the Dionysian mystery. This metamorphosis resonates with the Orphic accounts of Phanes and Protagonos as taurophys, or bull-natured. So in the Orphic cosmogony, Zeus swallows Phanes to cement his rulership over the cosmos, and thus takes on the characteristics of the previous demiurge, Phanes. So he becomes him in a way, takes on the character of the bull. We also see the bull in Dionysus, who is the next, let's say, condensed form of Zeus. Thus, we see the highest divinity voluntarily assuming the shape associated with the earliest manifestation of the Godhead. So this is like a reverse theogony. It's basically inverting what we've seen from the Orphic cosmogony before, and it establishes a pattern of divine descent that culminates in Dionysus. It's this charming thrill, this terpsis that is experienced by Zeus is not just an erotic pleasure, but it's an ontological transformation. So he is changing his being in order to essentially sate this divine yearning. And this paradoxical intensification of being it's apparent in its diminishment, but there's something really beautiful about it too, and I hope you guys can see it as well as we continue to read. But there's a phenomenological moment that reveals what might be termed as the ecstasy of descent. As he is becoming mortal, there is an ecstatic moment. There is pleasure found in being born into the material realm from the divine. So divinity experiencing itself anew through this voluntary self-alienation really does kind of perform a balm of the soul, if you will. Like this, we yearn too for a return to unity, a return to divinity. That is part of the human condition. However, what we're experiencing here is Nonnus quite clearly telling us that the divine also yearns for us, and yearns for the experience of us. See, Zeus coming down to be a part of and copulate in a sense with Europa is a divine love, right? Now, it is of course an abduction in the case of the Greeks, and in many ways our modern morals have defined it as something much more than an abduction. I'm not going to say the word here because it's YouTube, but we all know many of the cases of abduction in antiquity were basically termed as non-consensual. We'll just leave it at that. In this case, what I think it is a metaphor for a divine yearning. This is an incapability of Zeus to not be able to not want to be a part of the material world. There is a divine love with this demiurgic creator with his own creations. Now we've got some in the chat. For sure, even the gods can get bored. Yeah, I think there is something about that. There is something about getting bored with unity. There is, it's quite clear, at least to me, when reading a lot of this material, that there is a reason for multiplicity. There is a reason for separation. The creation of the container of being that is you, that is finite, that doesn't last forever, has a beauty that cannot be experienced in this field of unity. When everything is all one, there's no experience, there's no relation, and it seems that this unity craves relation. So let's keep going and see how it shakes out. High above the sea, the girl, throbbing with fear, navigated on bullback, unmoving, unwetted. If you saw her, you would think it was Thetis, perhaps. Or Galatea, or Earthshaker's bedfellow, or Aphrodite seated on Triton's neck. I, sea-blue hair, marveled at the waddle-foot voyage. Triton heard the delusive lowing of Zeus and bellowed an echoing note to Cronos' son with his conch, by way of wedding song. Nereus pointed out to Doris, the woman carried along, mingling, wondering with fear, as he saw the strange voyager and his horns. But the maiden, a light freight for her bull barge, sailed along ox-riding with a horn for steering oar, and trembled at the high heaving of her watery course, while desire was the seaman. Love that line. And artful Boreas bellied out all her shaking robe with amorous breath, lovesick himself and in secret jealousy, whistled on the pair of unripe breasts, as when one of the Nereids has peeped out of the sea and seated upon a dolphin cuts the flooding calm, balanced there while she paddles with a wet hand and pretends to swim. Now, in this passage here, we have Poseidon as the sea blue hair, which, what a wonderful, epithet there. The waddle-foot voyage is a callback to Homer's word for the waddling gait of cattle. As the English would say, skew the dew. But what we have here is we see some other beings seeing this happening. Poseidon, if you're thinking about it in the context of Neoplatonism, Poseidon is not just the brother, but also the son of Zeus in this case. And in this Orphic conception, he is essentially let's call it the physical manifestation of Zeus as the creator. And he's seeing this divine version of Zeus coming into this world as a material bull and absconding with this beautiful maiden, Europa. And everybody's going, whoa, what is going on here? What's Zeus up to? So we continue. While the watery wayfarer, half seen, rounds his back and carries her dry through the brine, while the cleft tail of the fish passing through the sea scratches the surface in its course, so the bull lifted his back, and while the bull stretched, his drover Eros flogged the servile neck, with his charmed girdle and lifting bow on shoulder like a pastoral staff, shepherded Hera's bridegroom with Cyprus crook, driving him to Poseidon's watery pasture. Shame purpled the maiden cheek of Pallas unmothered, when she spied Cronion ridden by a woman. So Zeus clove the course with watery furrow, but the deep sea did not quench his passion. For did not the water conceive Aphrodite by a heavenly husbandry, and bring her forth from the deeps? Thus a girl steered by the bull's unboisterous passage, herself at once both pilot and cargo. One saw this mimic ship of the sea alive and nimble-kneed, an Achaean seaman passing by, and he cried out in this fashion, "Oh, my eyes! What's this miracle? How comes it that he cuts the waves with his legs and swims over the barren sea, this land-pasturing bull? Navigable earth is that new creation of Cronades? Shall the farmer's wain trace a watery rut through the brine-serpent deep, or the brine-sprint deep?" So we have a call to Pallas Unmothered, that is Athena, as she was born from the head of Zeus. But what really catches me here, just upon reading it, just to stop for a second, is this. We've got him talking about how even the sea, which bears Aphrodite, is not enough for his deep passion. This call out of Eros flogging the servile neck of Zeus, of the king of the universe. He's bowed his head low in essentially surrendering himself to the passion of Europa, and how Eros is driving him along. And then you have people seeing this. What is this cow doing traversing the sea? What is this bull doing? There was another line that really popped for me there. A mimic ship. No, it wasn't that there. Oh, well, it's past for now. But let's see what else we have here. So we continue. That's a bastard voyage I descry upon the waves. Surely Selene has gotten an unruly bull, and leaves the sky to traipse over the high seas. Or no, deep-water Thetis drives a coach on a floating racecourse. This sea bull is a creature very different from the land bull, has a fish-like shape, must be a nereid with other looks, not naked now, but in the long flowing robes, driving this bull unbridled to march afoot on the waters. A new fashion that. If it is, Demeter, wheaten-haired, cleaving the grey back of the sea with water-faring ox-hoof, then thou, Poseidon, must have turned landlubber, and migrated to the thirsty back of earth, afoot behind the plough, and cut Demeter's furrows with thy sea vessel, blown by land winds, tramping a voyage on the soil. Bull, you are astray, out of your country. Nereus is no bull drover, Proteus no ploughman, Glaucus no gardener, no marsh ground, no meadows in the billows. On the barren sea there's no tillage, but sailors cut the ship harboring water with steering oar, and do not split with iron. Earthshaker's hinds do not sow in the furrows, but the sea's plant is seaweed. Sea's sowing is water. The sailor is the farmer. The only furrow is the ship's grain and wake. The hooker is the plow. Now there's a call out to Selene, the moon, who is known as the goddess of bulls. And that's a callback to Egypt too. So we see that as well in Nonnus, his heritage in Egypt. But we can see here that everyone from gods to mortals is going, what is happening here with Zeus? Why is he here? Why has he absconded with Europa? And why is there a bull swimming across the sea? What Nonnus is talking about here, I think, is a liminal crossing of the soul. This is the soul crossing between realms, between the realm of the divine and the realm of matter. There's a lot of maritime imagery that talks very clearly and resonates very deeply with the Orphic conception of the soul and the Orphic conception of water as one of the most beginning materials. Now, Europa's journey across the sea on the back of the divine bull of Zeus is a symbol for the liminal crossing between that celestial and earthly domain. She kind of symbolizes the soul herself. And it echoes through this Orphic narrative of the soul's journey through the bitter sea, or the Pikran Thalasis, of its journey to corporeal embodiment, essentially, while maintaining divine nature. That's called to here with this idea of unwetted. So she's on the back of the bull, but none of the water touches her. So in this journey, she's still pure all the way through. So this vessel of Zeus, the bull, carrying her through without becoming wetted or becoming tainted by the journey. Now, the Orphic gold tablets also have something that I think is critical here to understanding Nonnus. This phrase from fragment 474, I am parched with thirst and perishing. This idea of thirst, wetness, the soul's watery journey, there's a sense that the cosmos is somewhat watery as well. Proclus, on the Orphic tradition, says the soul descends into generation and is surrounded by waters in his commentary on the Timaeus. But what I want to note is this phenomenological precision that Nonnus is describing. Unmoving, unwetted, akenetos abreketos, signifying the soul's essential imperviousness to the flux of becoming. Even as it participates in the journey through to materiality, it stays pure. This is a paradoxical state of immersed transcendence, and it mirrors that Orphic conception of the soul's journey through those channels. The gathering of the sea deities to witness the crossing, we have Triton, Nereus, Doris, positions the event as a cosmic threshold moment. It's not just happening here on Earth, it's happening everywhere. And it's a punctuation in the fabric of being where divinity and mortality enter into new relation. Now, what's particularly significant is the statement, sea blue hair marveled, and I talked about this a little bit before. Poseidon even is wondering at the bull transformation, and it establishes a hierarchy of divine comprehension. Even the gods stand amazed at this voluntary divine descent. This emptying of divine fullness, of becoming mortal and becoming vulnerable, constraints into the constraints of materiality, is something that's shocking to everyone who's seeing it. And it's going to get wilder. But how came you to have dealings with a maid? Do bulls also go mad with love and ravish women? Has Poseidon played a trick and ravished a girl under the shape of a horned bull like a river god? Has he woven another plot to follow the bedding of Tyro, just as he did the other day when the watery paramour came trickling up with counterfeit ripples like a bastard Eunepius? So the Hellenic sailor spoke his amazement as he passed by. Then the girl presaged her union with the bull, and tearing her hair, she broke out in lamentable tones. Deaf water, voiceless coasts, say to the bull, if cattle can hear and hearken, merciless, spare a girl. Ye coasts, pray tell my loving father that Europa has left her native land, seated upon a bull, my ravisher, my sailor, and I think my bedfellow. Take these ringlets to my mother, ye circling breezes. Boreas, I conjure thee, receive me on thy pinions in the air, as thou didst ravish thine Athenian bride. But stay my voice, or I may see Boreas in love, like the bull. So the girl spoke, as the bull ferried her on his back. Now Tyro's the daughter of Salomonius, who was loved by the river god Eunepius, and Poseidon took that shape as well. So there's a horned aspect to all river gods. They all have horns. And so we see that horned element in Phanes, Zeus, Poseidon, river gods, Dionysus. Very, very common motif. But this cry out, this lamentation of Europa is very, very much like being born into this world. There is a longing as well. So you see Zeus longing, coming into material form, and Europa also exhibiting the same sort of longing. She's being taken from her land into something else. So there's like a divine convergence. As the divine comes in longing, so too does the mortal long for being divine again. Then Cadmos, passing in his travels from land to land, followed the never-staying tracks of the bull-turned bridesman. He came to the blood-stained cave of Arima, when the mountains had moved from their seats and were beating at the gate of inexpugnable Olympus, when the gods took wing above the rainless Nile, like a flight of birds far out of reach, oaring their strange track in the winds of heaven, and the seven zones of the sky were sore assailed. This was the reason. Zeus Cronades had hurried to Pluto's bed to beget Tantalos, that mad robber of the heavenly cups, and he laid his celestial weapons, well hidden, with his lightning, in a deep cavern. From underground the thunderbolts belched out smoke. The white cliff was blackened. Hidden sparks from a fire-barbed arrow heated the water springs. Torrents boiling with foam and steam poured down the Mygdonian gorge until it boomed again. Now, he's hiding these in the cave of Dictae. It says here, he came to the blood-stained cave of Erema, which is a mountain range in Asia, under which the monster Typhoeus was said to be laid. So there's a giant, a monster in this cave. Now, probably not safe to hide your cosmic weaponry in a cave where there's a giant of chaos. Perhaps there's some reason that we'll get to here in the story. But then we also have something about Tantalos. So there is a foreshadowing of cosmic theft, some sort of theft of divine implements given to improper beings. Tantalos stealing the divine food of ambrosia and the divine drink and giving it to men. Well, that's probably what's about to happen here. Now, Nonnus' treatment of Zeus's transformation into a bull and the abduction of Europa evokes this divine yearning that I've been talking about. Whereas Neoplatonic tradition emphasizes the soul's ascent, this epistrophe, towards the divine, Nonnus is inverting it. And this pattern depicts the highest principle, Zeus, as the one who's descending and yearning. And for all intents and purposes, I talked about it already, Europa is also yearning, so there is a nexus where these two, between divine and mortal, are meeting. This inversion prefigures that central mystery of the Dionysian worship where divinity seeks union with mortality and mortality with divinity, and it finds itself in that nexus of Dionysus. Now, Plotinus in the Aeneid says, love is an activity of the soul reaching after the good. So anything being driven by this eros is good, right? And so the way that they seem to have understood longing, love, desire, yearning is very different than what we seem to understand it as here, and that is very common in most discussions. We don't see people talking about it in the same way that they seem to have. Now, in Orphic cosmogony, we've talked about it. Phanes is also called Eros and Protagonos, and he emerges from the cosmic egg as this firstborn deity, bearing within himself the seeds of all subsequent differentiation. Inside of the egg, all things are available. Think about the egg. It's a common shape. Many different animals come out of an egg, none of them the same shape, right? So there's many animals that lay eggs, but out of that egg is the infinite possibility. And I think that's what they saw in the egg and why they talk about Phanes as coming from an egg. There is an undifferentiated unity within the egg, but once that egg fractures, all of that multiplicity spills out. And that's being hearkened to here in Nonnus. Since Phanes was the first god to appear, he is the light that shines on the undifferentiated world and reveals the different forms for us. Now, this primordial eros functions as the principle that initiates cosmic manifestation, the force that draws undifferentiated unity into that diverse expression, as we just kind of alluded to. When Zeus assumes this form of the bull, he makes himself vulnerable in ways that challenge the conventional theological assumptions of divine impassibility. As the text emphasizes, spreading his back, submissive, he raised up Europa. So he's willingly becoming mortal, which is wild, right? The guy who's holding the whole cosmos together is saying, well, for right now, it's going to cause some chaos, but I'm going to become mortal. Then at a nod from his mother, the earth, Cilician Typhoeus stretched out his hands and stole the snowy tools of Zeus. Now, Typhoeus is a giant. So, from his mother, Gaia. Now, we've talked about Gaia on the channel before. Gaia is this cosmic justice. Gaia is the she kind of prods things along. When things are out of order, she prods the giants or prods her more primordial children to shake things up, and that's about what's going to happen here. The snowy tools of Zeus, the tools of fire. Then spreading his row of rumble-rattling throats, he yelled as his war cry, the cries of all wild beasts together. The snakes that grew from him waved over his leopards' heads, licked the grim lions' manes, girdled with their curly tails spiral-wise round the bull's horns, mingled the shooting poison of their long, thin tongues with the foam spittle of the boars. Now he laid the gear of Cronades in a cubbyhole of the rock, and spread the harvest of his clamoring hands into the upper air. And that battalion of hands one-throttled Cynosurus beside the ankle tip of Olympos. One gripped the Parrhasian bear's mane as the rested on heaven's axis, and dragged her off. Another caught the ox drover and knocked him out. Another dragged Phosphorus, and in vain under the circling turning posts sounded the whistling of the heavenly lash in the morning. Now, what's he doing here? So Typhoeus grabs the tools of Zeus, not only the lightning, but all of it. In fact, it's the sinews of Zeus. So in order to become mortal, he had to essentially take off the things that bind. The ethereal chain is what it's usually referred to in the Orphic rhapsodic theogonies that bind the cosmos together. It is only through gaining the sinews that this Typhoeus, this giant, is capable of wielding the weapons and the tools of Zeus. Now, it says the snowy tools, that's basically a sign of coming snow. Often storm showers, rain showers mean that there's some sort of precipitation coming. The 100 heads of the monster is referred to here as shapes of all different kinds. So he had 200 hands. We have this kind of like callback to Hesiod's Theogony, where we have the Hecatonchires, who have 100 hands and hundreds of heads. So we know we're dealing with a primordial giant here in Typhoeus. It says also his hands were numerous as cornstalks in a field. So not only is he wielding the thunderbolts, but he is reaching out and he's literally gripping celestial icons in the sky. He's gripping the bear, he's gripping the ox drover, he's gripping Cynosurus, he's gripping Callisto, he's gripping all of the different constellations. He's about to shake the heavens. He carried off the dawn, Hesperos, and is held in the bowl, so that timeless, half-complete horsewoman season rested her team, and in the shadowy curls of his serpent hair heads the light was mingled with gloom. The moon shone rising in broad day with the sun. Still there was no rest. The giant turned back and passed from north to south, and he left one pole and stood by the other, and with a long arm he grasped the charioteer, I think we're talking about Helios there, and flogged the back of hailstorming Ajoceros. He dragged the 2 fishes out of the sky and cast them into the sea. He buffeted the ram, that mid-nipple star of Olympos, who balances with equal pin day and darkness over the fiery orb of his springtime neighbor. With trailing feet, Typhoeus mounted close to the clouds. Spreading abroad the far scattered host of his arms, he shadowed the bright radiance of the unclouded sky by darting forth his tangled army of snakes. One of them ran up the right through the rim of the polar circuit and skipped upon the backbone of the heavenly serpent, hissing his mortal challenge. So, the springtime neighbor, that's the ram, which we just passed, so kind of fortuitous. One made for Cepheus' daughter, with starry fingers twisting a ring as close as the other, enchained Andromeda, bound already with a second bond aslant under her bands. Another, a horned serpent, entwined about forked horns of the bull's horned head of shape like his own, and dangled coiling over the bull's brow, tormenting with open jaws the Hyades, opposite ranged like a crescent moon. Poison-spitting tangles of serpents in a bunch girdled the ox drover. Another made a bold leap when he saw another snake in Olympos, and jumped around the Ophiuchus' arms that he held the viper. Then curving his neck and coiling his crawling belly, he braided a second chaplet about Ariadne's crown. What's going on here? Typhoeus is rearranging the cosmos, and he's doing it almost like a toddler. He's this monstrous giant born of the earth, and he emerges in this story as an anti-cosmic principle. You could think like maybe even in Revelations, which is going to be popular around Nonnus' time. We're thinking about Revelations. This is this antichrist dragon that's rearranging the cosmos with these animalistic sounds, like it says the sounds of all animals bellowed from his throat, and he's gripping all the constellations. It's very much like John and like Revelations. And so what we see here is kind of this end of the world, apocalyptic kind of scene. And he threatens to essentially undo the entire cosmic order unless something happens, right? His theft of the thunderbolts, the subsequent disruption of the celestial structures, the constellations themselves, are a challenge to the harmonious structure that underpins the cosmos, and it's an inversion of this demiurgic activity, this celestial disruption, this sparagmos, this dismemberment of the cosmos, again foreshadowing Dionysius's dismemberment. It threatened the entire world. As he says, the axis passing through the heavens hollow, fixed upright in the midst, groaned at the sound. The very pillars of the cosmos are under assault. So what is he all about? Typhoeus embodies this necessary counterpart to divine order. We have to have divine chaos at the same time. And we see this modeled in Apollo as the divine harmony, Dionysus as the divine wild nature. Phanes establishes the celestial order in the beginning. Now Typhoeus threatens to undo it. He doesn't just merely threaten the political order, but the fundamental celestial structure. He's ripping the cosmos down. His disarrangement of this is the antithesis of where we've been building in this Orphic cosmogony up to this point. And the groaning of that cosmic axis invokes that Orphic cosmological conception. So it's all embedded in Nonnus here. It's not just literary. It is something that he is actively dealing with, it seems. Now, the response of the celestial bodies themselves is going to be significant. They are kind of forming this defensive phalanx against chaotic dissolution. So the celestial structures, the heavens, not only are they prophetic of what's to come, but they act as a shield, if you will. And this kind of evokes this Orphic principle of cosmic sympathy, where in levels of being, they resonate and respond to disturbances in the whole. If you push on one area, like on a spider web, it's going to affect another area of the web. Then Typhoeus, many-armed, turned to both ends, shaking with his host of arms the girdle of Zephyros and the wing of Euros opposite. So he's shaking the winds. Dragging first Phosphoros, then Hesperos, and the crest of Atlas, many a time in the weedy gulf he seized Poseidon's chariot and dragged it from the depths of the sea to the land. So he's pulling the water onto the land. Again he pulled out a stallion by his brine-soaked mane from the undersea manger. Nonnus knows what he's doing here. And threw the vagabond nag to the vault of heaven, shooting his shot at Olympos. He hit the sun's chariot, and the horses on their round whinnied under the yoke. Many a time he took a bull at rest from his rustic plough-tree, and shook him with a threatening hand, bellow as he would, then shot him against the moon like another moon, and stayed her course, then rushed hissing against the goddess, checking with the bridle her bull's white yoke straps, while he poured out the mortal whistle of a poison-spitting viper. But the Titan Mene would not yield to the attack, battling against the giants' heads like horned to hers. She carried many a scar on the shining orb of her bull's horns, and Selene's radiant cattle bellowed amazed at the gaping chasm of Typhoon's throat. So we've got the Titan Selene of the moon in direct conflict with this giant, which is really an interesting and awesome image. Now, of course, Nonnus is Egyptian, so when we're thinking of Selene, we're thinking of Isis Hathor, the horns with the disc between them, thinking of that Egyptian iconography. The seasons undaunted armed the starry battalions, and the lines of heavenly constellations in a disciplined circle came shining to the fray. A varied host maddened the upper air with clamor and with flame, some whose portion was Boreas, others the back of the lips in the west, or the eastern zones, or the recesses of the south. The unshaken congregation of the fixed stars with unanimous acclamation left their places and caught up their traveling fellows. The axis, passing through the heavens hollow and fixed upright in the midst, groaned at the sound. Orion the hunter, seeing these tribes of wild beasts, drew his sword. In the blade of Tanagrian brand sparkled bright as its master made ready for attack. His thirsty dog, shooting light from his fiery chin, bubbled up in his starry throat and let out a hot bark, and blew out the steam from his teeth against Typhoon's beasts instead of the usual hair. The sky was full of din, and answering the seven-zoned heaven, the seven-throated cry of the Pleiades raised the war shout from as many throats, and the planets as many again banged out an equal noise. Now, here we have Orion the Hunter, one of the constellations, the Pleiades themselves raising out this seven-throated cry. It's the entire cosmos fighting against it, and they don't have their general, because Zeus is off being a bull somewhere, and the entire cosmos is paying the price for it. Radiant Ophiuchus, seeing the giant's direful, snaky shape from his hands so potent against evil, shook off the grey coils of the fire-bred serpents and shot the dappled coiling missile, while tempests roared around his flames. The viper arrows flew, slanting, and maddened the air. Then the archer let fly a shaft, that bold comrade of fish-like Aegoceros, the dragon, divided between the two bears, and visible within the circle of the wain, brandished the fiery trail of the heavenly spine. The ox-herd, Aragone's neighbor, attendant driver of the wain, hurled his crook with flashing arm, beside the knee of the image, and his neighbor, the swan, the starry lyre, presaged the victory of Zeus. So even in this cosmic chaos, where the stars are battling back against this Typhoon chaos, there is the prophecy that Zeus is going to be victorious. Of course, to the victor goes the story, so we'll find out here. But what are we talking about in this next scene? This is the ensouled cosmos. Now, the cosmos in our conception as reductivist scientific materialists is this dead matter, and only when something is alive does it have the concept of Zoe or life in it. Well, not so for the Orphics and for Nonnus. The cosmos itself is not just an image of Zeus, of the demiurge, it is alive as well. And so what we're seeing here is this celestial sympathy. The cosmos, the next level of that cosmic image, of that first principle of Zeus, is battling back, but it's doing so without the head, right? It's kind of flailing, if you will, in its attack against this Typhoeus, much in the way that Typhoeus is as well. So we see this chaotic fighting between what's left of the cosmic order and what has been born of this cosmic chaos. Neither Typhoeus is able to really wield the weapons all that well, and neither is the kind of like the cosmic stars, this ensouled cosmos itself, able to fight back all that well without the order of Zeus. Now, Proclus talks about this. Every order of the cosmos depends upon its corresponding divine cause. Without Zeus, there's a real problem at hand. Now, this defense says that the cosmos itself functions as a theophany in its own way. It's a visible manifestation of the invisible intelligence that is Zeus. So when he writes that the starry lyre presaged the victory of Zeus, he reveals that the celestial patterns themselves embody the prophetic meaning that the stars are not just physical bodies, but they are hieroglyphs of divine intention. When we look to the stars, we are seeing what is going to transpire. There is not only prophecy, but it is all written already in the stars. Now, this is very common for late antiquity, and it remains to be common if you bite the apple of astrology, if you will. But this understanding of the cosmos as theophany reflects the Orphic theological vision articulated by Proclus. The visible cosmos is an image of the invisible divine orders, and each level of being manifests the principles of those above it. So, inside of the insoluble cosmos, inside of the image of the cosmos, inside of all of us, is the same divine purpose, the same divine prophecy. Now Typhoeus shifted to the rocks, leaving the air to flog the seas. He grasped and shook the peak of Corycios, and crushing the flood of the river that belongs to Sicilica, joined Tarsus and Cydnos together in one hand, then hurled a volley of cliffs upon the mustard waves of the brine. As the giant advanced, with feet trailing in the briny flood, his bare loins were seen dry through the water, which broke heavy against his mid-thigh, crashing and booming. His serpents afloat sounded the charge with hissings. From brine-beaten throats and spitting poison led the attack upon the sea. There stood Typhon in his fish-giving sea, his feet firm in the depths of the weedy bottom, his belly in the air and crushed in clouds, hearing the terrible roar from the mane-bristling lions of his giant's head. The sea lion lurked in the oozy gulf. There was no room in the deep for all its phalanx of leviathans, since the earth-born monster covered a whole sea. Larger than the land, with flanks that no sea could cover, the seals bleated, the dolphins hid in the deep water, the many-footed squid, a master of craft, weaving his trailing web of criss-cross knots, stuck fast on his familiar rock, making his limbs look like a pattern on the stone. All the world was a-tremble. The love-maddened Murray herself, drawn by her passion for the serpent's bed, shivered under the god-desecrating breath of these seafaring serpents. The waters piled up and touched Olympos with precipitous seas. As the streams mounted on high, the bird never touched by rain found the sea his neighbor and washed himself. Typhoeus, holding a counterfeit of the deep-sea trident with one earth-shaking flip from his enormous hand, broke off an island at the edge of the continent, which is the curb of the brine, circled it round, and hurled the whole thing like a ball. And while the giant waged his war, his hurtling arms drew near to the stars and obscured the sun as they attacked Olympos and cast the precipitous crag. Now, after the frontier of the deep, after the well-laid foundation of the earth, this bastard Zeus armed his hand with fire-barbed thunderbolt. Raising the gear of Zeus was hard work for the monster Typhoeus. With 200 furious hands, so great was the weight, but Cronion would lift it with one hand. No clouds were about the giant against his dry arms. The thunder let out a dull-sounding note, booming gently without a clap. And in the drought of the air scarcely did a thirsty dew trickle in snowflakes without a drop in them. The lightning was dim, and only a softish flame shone, sparkling shamefacedly like smoke shot with flame. The thunderbolts felt the hand of a novice, and all their manly blaze was unmanned. Often they slipped out of those many hands and went leaping of themselves, the brands going astray, missing the familiar hand of their heavenly master. As a man beats a horse that loathes the bit, some stranger, a novice untaught, flogging a restive nag as he tries again and again in vain, and the defiant beast knows by instinct the changeling hand of an unfamiliar driver. leaping madly, rearing straight into the air with hind hooves planted immovable, lifting the forelegs and pawing out to the front, raising the neck till the mane is shaken abroad over both shoulders at once. So the monster labored, with this hand or that, to lift the fugitive flash of the roving thunderbolt. Now, so he's trying, but he doesn't have the cosmic order. He doesn't have what Zeus has. He's got immense strength enough to lift them, to lift the weight of them, but without the cunning that Zeus has, without the understanding that Zeus has, it's all for naught. And so we're seeing here that even though this chaos is occurring, it's not going to last. But how are we going to get to the point where Zeus gets these back? This disruption of the cosmic order threatens not just the established structure, but the possibility of ontological distinction. It's shuffling everything up, so everything that was in their place is now getting thrown out of the place. We've got sea creatures over here, and this is something that happens again in Book 5 and 6, which we talked about in the last live stream. When cosmic order is supplanted, crazy stuff happens. When Ma'at, the Egyptian concept of order, is out of order, some crazy stuff happens. And so in this case, what we are talking about is the cosmic order is completely upheaved, the sea is lifted to the heavens are thrown into the sea. This dissolution of these elemental boundaries is just, it's leaving everything in a giant mess. The division of different beings depends on these boundaries, according to Damascus. So we see this Neoplatonic idea here that without these proper boundaries, we cease to exist in the way that we do. So it's very important that we do that. Now, why does this matter to us? Well, this matters because matter matters, especially to the divine. The very eros, the desire that we see in Zeus to come down, to be a part of it, is the desire that is being overturned by Typhon. Now, we can think about this as a metaphor. Would we seek to supplant the divine order ourselves? What happens? When we let the ego run the show instead of the spirit run the show, what happens? Suffering. Bad things happen when we don't live by divine order. That's what Nonnus is getting at here. So we continue. Well, at the very time when Cadmos paid his visit to Arima in his wanderings, the seafaring bull set down the girl from his withers. Quite dry upon the shore by Dicte. Remember, that's the cave where Zeus was raised, where Cronus was raised, where Dionysus is raised. It's the cave of Nyx here on this plane of existence, if you will. But Hera saw Cronades, shaken with passion and mad with jealousy. She called out with an angry laugh, "Phoebos, go and stand by your father, and some plowman may catch Zeus and put him to some earth-shaking plow tree." She's like, well, if you're going to be a horny bull, I'm going to send a farmer out there to put a yoke on you. I wish one would catch him and put him to the plow. Then I could shout, my lord, learn to bear two goads now, Cupid's and the farmer's. You must be verily lord of pastures, my fine archer, and shepherd your parent, or cattle driver Selene may put Cronades under the yoke. She may score Zeus's back with her merciless lash, when she is off to herdsman Endymion's bed in a hurry. Zeus, your majesty, it is a pity Io did not see you coming like that to court her, when she was a heifer with horns on her forehead. She might have bred you a little bull as horny as his father. Look out for Hermes. The professional cattle lifter may think he is catching a bull and steal his own father. Maybe he may give a harp once again to your son Phobos as a price for the ravisher ravished. But what can I do? If only Argos were still alive, shining all over with sleepless eyes, that he might be Hera's drover and drag Zeus to some inaccessible pasture and prod his flanks with a crook. So we see Hera having a laugh. having a laugh. See what you've done. You've caused all this chaos. Hera's speech is a mass of illusions, right? She's got Apollo in there. She's talking about him as the shepherd of the pastures, having been a god of herdsmen originally, most likely. We've got a callback to Selene and her bulls. We've got her love of Endymion and Latmos and how she visited him while he slept. we've got all of these different things that she is essentially jabbing at him, if you will, and it's quite funny. You can see that Nonnus has a sense of humor as well, which is sorely missing in a lot of late antiquity. So I'm sure this was also quite the laugher in when it was presented in that time period. But so much for Hera. We're done with that now. But Cronades put off his bull-faced form, and in the shape of a young man ran round the innocent girl. He touched her limbs, loosed first the bodice about the maid's bosom, pressed as if by chance by the swelling circle of the firm breast, kissed the tip of her lip, then silently undid the holy girdle of unwedded virginity, so well guarded, and plucked the fruit of love hardly ripe. Soon her womb swelled, quick with twin progeny, and Zeus the husband passed over his bride with the divine offspring in her womb to Asterion, a consort of rich fortune. Then rising beside the charioteer's ankle, the bridegroom bull of Olympus sparkled with stars, he who keeps his dew-loving back for the sun in the springtime, crouching upon his hams across the path as he rises. Half submerged in the sea, he shows himself holding out his right foot towards Orion, and at evening quickens his pace into the circle and passes the charioteer, who rises with him to run his course. So he was established in the heavens, but Typhoeus was no longer to hold the gear of Zeus. So this is Zeus becoming the symbol of the bull, the symbol of Taurus, and this whole illusion of the abduction of Europa is also like the coming of spring. It is the generative force of Zeus coming down into the cosmos and re-enlivening things at this time period. This is the divine consummation. This is the reason he comes down. This is the reason that force is emanating down into this realm of reality to impregnate the divine body of the earth itself. But this completion, this katabatic descent into the bull form, culminates the whole thing. The celestial elevation of the bull bridegroom into the stars at the end there, where he's kind of like essentially carving the event into the cosmos, is a metaphysical resolution of this voluntary divine self-limitation. That generative force pouring into the cosmos is the divine manifestation returning to its celestial source. It's the beginning of that journey. This transformation completes a theological cycle. The highest divinity descends into material form, it fulfills its generative purpose, and then begins its ascent to transform the celestial realm. So it's a cycle, just like our natural cycle. So you could say this is talking about the natural cycles of the world, or it's the natural cycles of the cosmos. Probably both. But this divine principle now seeks to return to its original domain, just like the soul we were talking about. It comes down, it's going to want to, yearn to return. What began as this voluntary self-limitation culminates in cosmic enrichment. It's the same journey that our soul takes. This is called a katasterism, and it reverses the movement through what might be termed astral divinization. The material form is elevated to celestial permanence. The astronomical specifics reveal that Zeus as a bull becomes the constellation Taurus, whose position in the zodiacal circle marks the regenerative power of the spring. This seasonal symbolism is significant. Spring represents nature's rebirth and the winter's contraction. So this bull's katasterism represents divine renewal after the self-limitation. So for the cosmos to continually renew itself, the generative property of the highest principle of Zeus has to continually sacrifice itself. So this is where we get, I think, a lot of the bull sacrifice that you see, the Apis bull, the Dionysian sparagmos of the bull, where they devour the bull. You see it as well in the sacrifice of the bull in Babylon and within the Mithraeus cult. All right. But Zeus Cronades, along with archer Eros, left the circling pole and met roving Cadmos amid the mountains on his wandering search. Then he devised with him an ingenious plan, and entwined the deadly threads of Moira's spindle for Typhon. Excuse me. And goatherd Pan, who went with him, gave Zeus almighty cattle and sheep and rows of horned goats. Then he built a hut with mats of wattled reeds, and fixed it on the ground. He put on Cadmos a shepherd's dress, so that no one could know him in disguise. When he had clad his sham herdsman in the make-believe costume, he gave clever Cadmos the deceiving panpipes, part of the plot to pilot Typhon to his death. Now Zeus called the counterfeit herdsman and the winged controller of generation, and disclosed this one common plan. Look alive, Cadmos. Pipe away, and there shall be a fine weather in heaven. Delay, and Olympus is scourged, for Typhoeus is armed with my heavenly weapons. Only the Aegis cape is left me, but what will my Aegis do fighting with Typhon's thunderbolt? I fear old Kronos may laugh aloud. I am shy of the proud neck of my lordly adversary Iapetus. I fear Hellas even more, that mother of romances. What if one of the nation called Typhon Lord of Rain, or highest and ruling in the heights, defiling my name? Become a herdsman for one day dawn. Make a tune of your mind-befooling shepherd's pipes, and save the shepherd of the universe, that I may not hear the noise of cloud-gathering Typhoeus, the thunders of the new impostor Zeus, that I may stop his battling with lightnings and volleying with thunderbolts. If the blood of Zeus is in you, and the breed of Enechian Io, bewitch Typhon's wits by the sovereign remedy of your guileful pipes and their tune. I will give you ample recompense for your service, 2 gifts. I will make of you a savior of the world's harmony, and the husband of the lady Harmonia. Now, shepherd of the universe, this is Nonnus being clever. This is Nonnus saying, yeah, we realize you guys have your shepherd. Well, guess what? We've had one too. That's really him being kind of pithy. You also love, primeval founder of fecund marriage, bend your bow and the universe is no longer adrift. If all things come from you, friendly shepherd of life, draw one shot more and save all things. As fiery god, arm yourself against Typhon, and by your help let the fiery thunderbolts return to my hand. All vanquisher, strike one with your fire, and may your charmed shot catch one whom Cronion did not defeat, and may he have madness from the mind-bewitching tune of Cadmos, as much as I had passion for Europa's embrace. With these words, Zeus passed away in the shape of a horned bull again, from which the Tauros mountain now takes its name. So what are we talking about? He's arming Cadmos with music. There's a theurgical power in this harmony, and so he is arming this mortal with the power to bewitch the gods, to bewitch the cosmos, if it were, just like Orpheus. So this is a callback to Orpheus, and Orpheus's ability to bewitch all sorts of animals. So in this case, we have Typhoeus as the animal, and Orpheus is capable of wooing all the animals or even the gods. So will Cadmus here. This is like his callback to Orpheus. So through the harmonious nature or the notes of his pipes, Cadmus is going to be able to bewitch the chaotic giant, demonstrating the ability of music to restore order, to quell the dissonance that threatens this world axis. As Iamblichus says in his Life of Pythagoras, music heals the disharmony of the soul, and I think that's really what this whole story is a metaphor for the soul itself. And music is the cure, the music of harmony, of Apollo, of the logos of pagan Nonnus. Now we have the Orphic hymn to Apollo. Through your music you harmonize the poles. Now the theological implications here are pretty intense. The victory over chaos doesn't come through brute force, through conquering, but through the imposition of a harmonic principle. There is a slight subversion, and some deception happening here. but it's an Orphic understanding that Nonnus is encoding in this. There's an ordered cosmos, and in order to put it back into order, like must have like. So we must harmonically do this with the pipes, with music. Music then functions here as the mediating principle between those cosmic states of order and chaos, and it is the transformative force that converts that destructive energy back into ordered movement. So Cadmus, puffing his cheeks to blow the soft breath, which he will do, evokes the Orphic conception of pneuma, right? It's not just Orphic, it's a Greek conception as well, but it's the animating principle that transforms inert matter. If you're listening to Heraclitus, it's the breath that is the animating force, the soft breath, the mouthakos air that subdues the monster, parallels the Orphic understanding that the divine inspiration as the greatest yet most powerful force in the cosmos. We continue. But Cadmus tuned up the deceitful notes of his harmonious reeds, and as he reclined under the neighboring tree in the pasturing woodland, wearing the country garb of a real herdsman, he sent the deluding tune to Typhoon's ears, puffing his cheeks to blow the soft breath. The giant loved music, and when he heard this delusive melody, he leapt up and dragged along his viperish feet. He left in a cave the flaming weapons of Zeus, the flaming weapons of Zeus, with Mother Earth to keep them, and followed the notes to seek the neighboring tune of the pipes, which delighted his soul. So this music is so deceptive, even to the chaotic elements, that it will, what I think Nonnus is saying, that music is the cure-all. If you are in a chaotic state, what do? We tend to listen to some music, try and recalibrate the whole system. So if Typhoeus is our chaotic nature, our animal nature, music, the harmonious, ordered nature, brings us back into balance. And so Typhoeus puts the thunderbolts away. He's like, here, Mom, keep my toys. And follows the notes to seek the neighboring tune of the pipes, which delighted his soul. There he was seen by Cadmus near the bushes, who was sore afraid and hid in a cleft of the rocks. There's this giant who's as big as the earth itself hunting for this song, and you've got this poor mortal just going doo-doo-doo-doo. But the monster Typhoeus, with his head high in the air, saw him trying to hide himself, and beckoned with voiceless signs. Nor did he understand the trick in this beautiful music. Then face to face with the shepherd, he held out one right hand, not seeing the net of destruction, and with his middle face blood-red and human in shape, he laughed aloud and burst into empty boasts. "Why do you fear me, goatherd? Why do you cover your eyes with your hand? A fine feat, I should think it, to pursue a mortal man after Cronion. A fine feat to carry off Pan's pipes alone with the lightning. What have reeds to do with flaming thunderbolts? Keep your pipes alone, since Typhoeus possesses another kind of organ, the Olympian, which plays by itself. There sits Zeus without his clouds, hands unrumbling, none of his usual noise. He could do with your pipes. Let him have your handful of reeds to play. I don't join worthless reeds to other reeds in a row and wave them about, but I roll up clouds upon clouds into a lump, and I discharge a bang, all at once with rumblings all over the sky. Let's have a friendly match if you like. Come, and you make music and sound your reedy tune. I will crash my thundery tune. You puff out your cheek all swollen with wind, and blow with your lips, but Boreas is my blower, and my thunderbolts boom when breath flogs them. Drover, I will pay you for your pipes, for when I shall hold the scepter instead of Zeus, and drive the heavenly throne, you shall come with me. Leave the earth, and I will bring you to heaven, pipes and all, with your flock too, if you like. You shall not be parted from your herd. I'll settle your goats over the backbone of Aegiceros, in one of the same breed, or near the charioteer, who pushes the shining Olenian she-goat in Olympus with his sparkling arm. Now, what does this sound like? This really does sound like the the scene in the desert with Jesus. He's in the desert, and he's come face to face with the adversary, with Satan, and he's saying, "Just come with me. You don't have to stay with old Zeus. You can come with me. I'll give you the world. There's nothing that Zeus can't give you that I can't, or there's nothing that Zeus can give you that I can't, right? Follow me." So this Typhoeus is boasting of his power. He's boasting of his ability with all of the things that he has stolen from Zeus, and he is telling Cadmos, "Come with me." What we have here is Zeus shows up to the show first, then we have Typhoeus. We have the soul, we have the ego, in both years of Cadmus. So we are seeing this as the natural progression of what happens to the soul when it is in the material body. It's all right here in Nonnus. So much of what was coming to the surface in late antiquity is being played out here in such beautiful fashion by Nonnus. "I'll put your cattle beside the rainy bull's broad shoulder and make them stars rising in Olympos, or near the dewy turning point where Selene's cattle send out a windy moo from their life-warming throats. You will not want your little hut. Instead of your bushes, let your flock go flashing with the ethereal kids. I will make them another crib to shine beside the ass's crib, and as good as theirs. Be a star yourself instead of a drover, where the ox driver is seen. Wield a starry goad yourself, and drive the bear's Lyconian wain. Happy shepherd, be heavenly Typhon's guest at the table. Tune up on earth today, tomorrow in heaven. You shall have ample recompense for your song. I will establish your face in the starlit circle of heaven, and join your tuneful pipes to the heavenly harp. If you like, I will give you Athena for your holy bride. If you do not care for gray eyes, take Leto, or Charis, or Cytherea, or Artemis, or Hebe to wife. Only don't ask me for my Hera's bed. If you have a horse-master brother who can manage a team, let him take Helios's fiery four in hand." Here we have the dewy turning point is the spring equinox, and the gray eyes epithet of Athena. "If you want to wield the goatskin cape of Zeus, being a goatherd, I will make you a present of that too. I mean to march into Olympos caring nothing for Zeus unarmed. And what could Athena do to me with her armor? A female? Strike up, see the conquering Typhon comes, you herdsmen. Sing the new lawful sovereign of Olympus in me, bearing he scepter of Zeus and his robe of lightning." So, Nonnus has, basically, Cadmus has drawn Typhoeus away, and Zeus is in the process of probably reclaiming his stuff, right? And here we have this giant boastful monologue by Typhoeus saying, "Here's all the things I can do for you." What Nonnus is talking about here is the deception that's happening in his time, or at least how he sees it. We have this new up-and-coming idea supplanting the old order of things, and it is promising all of these great, wonderful things for you if you just take the time to switch teams. And I think Nonnus sees this in the 5th century. He's like, okay, tons of people have converted at this point, but as he sees it, Typhoeus is a representation of the other side of things, the other polemic. And in his not-so-tongue-in-cheek way, he's basically calling them out. And he's using their own parables in doing so, which is really quite clever. This entire piece is really beautifully stated. So he depicts Cadmus's use of music as deception and necessary for cosmic intervention. So the pipe music, it not only enchants the monster, but enchants the ego. And it reveals the underlying principle of harmonic proportion that structures the cosmos. It is the medicine that cures the cosmos. Now, this musical mimesis deceives everyone. It can deceive everyone. And so, Plotinus talks about this too. The universe is a single harmony formed of contraries. It's that tension between the poles that we're looking for. Macrobius mirrors this. The soul of the universe is interwoven according to musical ratio. We're getting close to the end here, guys. I'm glad so many of you are sticking with me. He spoke, and Adrastea took note of his words thus far. Nemesis, goddess of justice, has taken note of what Typhoeus has said. But when Cadmus understood that the son of earth had been carried by fate's thread into his hunting net, a willing captive, struck by the delightful sting of those soul-delighting reeds, unsmilingly he uttered this artful speech. So this is where Nonnus really hits it. He's like, this is what your proper response should be. You liked the little tunes of my pipes when you heard it. Tell me, what would you do when I strike out a hymn of victory on the harp of 7 strings to honor your throne? Indeed, I matched myself against Phoebus with his heavenly quill, and beat him with my own harp. But Cronades burnt to dust my fine ringing strings with a thunderbolt, to please his beaten son. But if I ever find again the swelling sinews, I will strike up a tune with my quills, to bewitch all the trees and the mountains in the temper of wild beasts. I will drag back Okeanos, that coronet self-wreathed about the earth and old as earth herself. I will make him hasten and bring his stream rolling back upon himself round the same road. I will stay the army of fixed stars and the racing planets and Pathon himself and Selene's carriage pole. But when you strike Zeus and the gods with your thunderbolt, do leave only the archer, that while Typhon feasts at his table, I and Phobos may have a match, and see which will beat which in celebrating mighty Typhon. And do not kill the dancing Parades, that they may weave the women's lay harmonious with our manly song when Phobos or your shepherd leads the merry dance. What's interesting here, and what I think we kind of also see, is a proto-version of the whole the violin battle between the devil and the violinist, right? Devil went down to Georgia. That's what this whole scene really is the devil went down to Georgia in ancient Greece, in late antiquity. And so Cadmus has some brains here. He's like, okay, I'll play your game, but I'm not gonna say anything that's gonna damn me, because I know that Nemesis, Justice, is listening. He finished, and Typhoeus bowed his flashing eyebrows and shook his locks. Every hair belched viper poison and drenched the hills. Quick, he returned to his cave and took up and brought out the sinews of Zeus and gave them to crafty Cadmus as the guest's gift. They had fallen on the ground in the battle with Typhon. Let's see, where are we at here? So he has tricked him to go in and get the things that are necessary for Zeus to wield the thunderbolts again. Zeus can't just go back and take the thunderbolts. He needs the sinews. Think of them as like the gloves or the ability in between the muscles to grasp these things. And so Cadmus has asked for him. Why don't you just give me those things that I can play the most fine music for you in your court? Now, this story is obscurely told, and Nonnus maybe didn't understand it. This is from Thomas Taylor, by the way. It is obviously old, but by some device or a well-aimed blow, Typhon had cut the sinews out of Zeus's arms in this battle, thus disabling him. Now, that's not in Nonnus. It's not part of his story, but it's part of the older narrative that Nonnus is drawing on to put this together for us in late antiquity, and really he preserves a lot of it. Cadmus gets them back, pretending that he wants to use them for harp strings, but as this fantastic tale, which very well may be oriental, kind of shows, this is a trick. This is very much a trick. The deceitful shepherd thanks him for the immortal gift. He handled the sinews carefully as if they were to be strung on the harp, and he hid them in a hole in the rock, kept safe for Zeus, the giant slayer. Then with pursed up lips he let out a soft and gentle breath, pressing the reeds and stealing the notes again, and sounded a tune more dainty than ever. Typhoeus pricked up all his many ears and listened to the melody and knew nothing. The giant was bewitched, while the false shepherd whistled by his side as if sounding the rout of the immortals with his pipes. But he was celebrating the soon-coming victory of Zeus, and singing the fate of Typhon to Typhon sitting by his side. So he excited him to frenzy even more, and as a lusty youth enamored is bewitched by delicious thrills by the side of a maiden his age-mate, and gazes now at the silvery round of her charming face, now at a straying curl of her thick hair, now again at her rosy hand, or notes the circle of her blushing breasts pressed by the bodice, and watches the bare neck as he delights to the eye, run over and over her body, never satisfied, and never will leave his girl. So Typhoeus yielded his whole soul to Cadmos for the melody to charm. Only Nonnus in that time is going to write this way. So we have the divine reconstitution happening here. Zeus is recovering the divine sinews thanks to Cadmos, the sinews that had been stolen. And these sinews, these cosmic desmoi, these bonds, are the very threads that hold the fabric of the universe together. So now with this act of divine and mortal together as a team, the universe can be put back together. So Nonnus portrays their retrieval as a ritual reenactment of the primordial cosmogony. It is this sacred mystery that mirrors the Orphic dismemberment and reconstitution of Dionysius Zagreus. This sundering of Zeus's power through the theft of his thunderbolts parallels the soul's fragmentation through this embodiment process. Just as the soul loses full access to its divinity and its potential in this material form, Zeus experiences this divine embodiment through the bull transformation, also temporarily unable to exercise his full cosmic authority. His thunderbolts, the emblem of his transcendent power, remain beyond his grasp until mortal intervention facilitates that restoration. This is really interesting. This is soteriological theology that is very much mimicking or mirroring what's happening in Christianity at that time. This pattern reconfigures conventional theological hierarchy as divinity self-sufficient and mortal as dependent. That's the typical way we think of it. But there's a reciprocal relationship happening here in Nonnus. It is both that are required for this reconstitution of order in the cosmos. This pattern establishes a soteriology of cosmic partnership, if you will. Salvation not as divine rescuing passive humanity or as human self-divinization without divine aid, but a conscious alignment of both parties toward a cosmic purpose or a divine order. It's not top-down or bottom-up, it's both. It's that divine tension. And so what we see here in that's essentially where we're at the end of Book 1, is Cadmus has put the beast to sleep through his deception. He has sided with Zeus despite being tempted. We've seen the divine descent of Zeus as a bull, Zeus's voluntary transformation. We've seen the cosmic disruption that comes from it. We've seen the harmonic restoration of the humanity's efforts to restore the cosmos, and then the recovery of the sinews of Zeus so that he can once again wield the thunderbolts and banish this giant back where it came. So, I mean, what we've seen throughout this journey in Book 1 is that this is Nonnus it's an Orphic palimpsest. He is hearkening back to the Orphic wisdom that was from 6 centuries before, which we now know stretches back there with the Derveni Papyrus, and potentially even before then, if you believe how the writers of the classical Greece talk about Orpheus potentially being as old as Egypt itself. So these ideas that Nonnus preserves for us have survived over the years. You know, in his way of encoding it, we can see the pieces come together. There's so much to be gained from this particular epic. Things that we thought were lost from the classical pagan viewpoint are really preserved in this document, and so I really challenge you to read it, to take a good look at it, and we'll probably go through it together here on the channel. Bibliography and sources, very important for such a tall order as going through an exegetical commentary on Nonnus here in Book 1. So now it is time for you guys to ask questions if you have any. I still see a few of you in here, so if you have any questions for me, I'll stick around for a little bit here to answer any you might have. That was a lot of talking. Whew. Oh, right. I had some questions here that might stir some in you. If there was anything in particular that you liked or listened to, or something that caught your ear or your eye in there, please ask. But yeah, I think Europa definitely parallels the soul's journey along with Zeus. It's Europa symbolizing the mortal soul, the mortal aspect of the soul, and the immortal aspect is Zeus. Oh, that is a good question. So putting these together, I often forget what I'm putting together in general. So, thanks, George. I really appreciate that. It says, first time listening to you live. I've been listening while cleaning, so I don't have any questions, but really appreciate your work. Well, thank you. I appreciate your comment. Yeah, how might the recovery of divine sinews relate to spiritual practice? Well, it's like the recovery of a muscle, right? We need to practice in order to develop the muscle so that we can utilize it. And so I think there's definitely something in that. That's a powerful question to think about as we explore Book 1 here. I will leave a link in this video to the Dionysiaca on Amazon if you want to get a copy, because it's awesome. Street Dream says, can you talk about the music, the language of the universe? Sure. I mean, what in particular do you want to know about that? Because for Nonnus, for the Greeks, as it were, music was everything. That harmony, it all goes back to Pythagoras and his music of the spheres, if you will. There is a certain divine harmonic that governs how things are ordered. That's both mathematical and musical at the same time. So I think, many talk about this when they talk about Greece. It is, you have Apollo, you have him as this harmonious, divine, very structured music, and then you have the wild, natured dithyrambs of Dionysus. Those are two sides of the same coin, really. And if we're looking at this as a palimpsest, we're seeing Apollo and Dionysus in Zeus and Typhoeus too. So there's two types of music, one of chaotic nature and one of a divine order. And it is somewhere in the balance of those two that we find a sweet spot, like a harmonic tension. And that is what creates a perfect divine order. Because you can't just have the perfect divine order of Apollo without that wild, natural, ecstatic, sound of Dionysus. It's a mix of the two. We're always kind of floating between those two poles. Wherever we find ourselves at that point is that harmony. And it's going to differ from person to person, in my opinion. Does that answer your question? I hope so. So I think we'll continue with this. And in next week, I'll do my best to... Good. I'm glad it's stretching what your mind is capable of bringing in. That's really the point of all this. I think next week we'll continue. We'll probably move on to Book 2 if I can get it ready in time. See if there's a latitude for that. I think we can do it. I think we could do like a book every week. Just go through, read them, and see what comes up, because it is really truly a masterwork, and it preserves quite a lot. But if that's all, guys, I'm going to let you go. And thanks for tuning in. And if you're tuning in after the fact, in the replay, please drop a comment, like, subscribe, all those good things. It's been a blast.